Good day viewers, you are welcome to my channel. I want us to consider the problem on coordinate geometry. The question asks us to write the equation of a line that passes through this point 8, minus 2, and the line is perpendicular to this line. This is an equation of a straight line. So we are asked to find the line that is perpendicular to this. Let's solve its solution. So one thing we need to know about lines is that when lines are parallel, there is a relationship between the gradient or the slope of that line or those lines. Once they are parallel, there is a relationship between their gradient. When they are perpendicular also, they have a different relationship between their slope or gradient. So for parallel line, let's see the relationship between them. For parallel lines, if M1 is a gradient of a line, let me say the first line that we are talking about, and M2 is the gradient of the second line that it's perpendicular to, but in this case we are considering parallel. If they are parallel, the gradient of the first line M1 must be equal to the gradient of the second line if they are parallel. So when two or more lines are parallel, their gradients are always equal. Even if you have three lines with gradient M1, M2 and M3, so M1 must be equal to M2 must be equal to what? M3. So that is that for parallel line. But based on this question, we need to focus on the perpendicular relationship. So for perpendicular lines now, for perpendicular lines, the gradient for these two now, let's say the first one is M1 multiplied by M2 must be equal to what? Minus 1. This is the relationship when the lines are what? When the lines are perpendicular. Now that we have this, the next thing we need to talk about, what is the equation of a straight line? The equation of a straight line is y equal to mx plus c. So since we are looking for the equation, let me call the gradient m1. So we need to find the gradient m1 and we find the y-intercept c. Once we find m1 and c, we substitute it in this equation. Let me call it equation 1, and with that we have achieved what they asked us to look for. We have gotten what they asked us to look for. So now let's first of all look for m1. So how do we look for m1? Let's look at the second equation for the second line, which is what? Minus 3x plus 1, as we have it in the question. Look at it here. It is what? This is the second one. Okay, so from this we can see that if we compare with the general equation, which is what? Mx, okay, let me say m2, because this m2 plus c, it means that m2 is now equal to what? Minus 3. Is that okay? So now we will now use this information that we have. To get m1. So m1 multiplied by m2, is equal to minus 1. So this is m2. So m1 times minus 3 is equal to minus 1. So that is that. So now with this, so it therefore means that if we divide both sides by, let me see where we stop. okay, we now divide both sides by minus 3. So we now have minus 1 divided by what? Minus 3, which will give us 1 over what? 3. That is m1. So now we have gotten m1. The next thing is for us to get what? C. So how do we get C? For us to get C, that is the reason why they gave us this at this point. So at point 8 comma minus 2, this is equal to what? S comma y, and that means that s is equal to 8, y is equal to what? Minus 2. So we are going to put s is equal to 8, y is equal to minus 2, and m1 is equal to what? Is equal to 1 over 3 in equation 1, so that we can find C. 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 Now let's put it. The equation. Let me bring down the equation. The equation 1 is y equal to m1 x plus c. So if we put all this now, what is y? Y is minus 2 equal to, what is our m1? m1 is 1 over 3 multiplied by x. X is 8. Then plus c. So we have minus 2 equal to 8 over 3 plus c. So let me remove this fraction by multiplying through by what? 3. So I multiply everything by 3. So 3 times minus 2 equal to 3 times 8 over 3 plus 3 times c. So if we do that, 3 times minus 2, we have minus 6 equal to, this one we cancel this, we have 3, then plus 3 times c plus 3c. So now from here we can move, from here let's move 8 to this side. We have minus 6 minus 8 equal to 3c. So 3c, this 3c is equal to minus 6 minus 8, that's minus 14. So if we divide both sides by 3, we have minus 14 divided by 3. So we have gotten c. So now we will now substitute. Let's put m1 equal to 1 over 3, and what? C is equal to what? Minus 1 over 4. C is equal to minus 14 over 3 rather. We are putting it in equation 1, which is the equation that we are looking for. So if we put it, equation 1 will now be y is equal to 1 over 3x minus 1 over minus 14 over 3. Is that taken? Minus 14 over 3. So this is the equation, but if we feel like writing it in another form, we can multiply 3 through by 3. So we now have 3y equal to what? X minus 14. So this is the equation that is perpendicular to y is equal to what? Minus 3x plus 1. So this equation is perpendicular to this. So that is that, and that is what they asked us to look for. Thank you for watching. Please help me to subscribe if you are watching through YouTube. Help me to share and like if you are watching through any other social media platform. Thank you.